compliant with the law, how can it then demand of
compliance
others
of the
compliance?
Yeah.
We also, and you know, it would be in an ideal situation, the electoral management body might have been able to play a role in the internal political party electoral processes, but I don't think the electoral management body currently enjoys the confidence of the electoral, sorry, of the political parties themselves. So I think the parties themselves will have to work on that aspect
Yes.
of things.
Yeah.
There is,
okay.
you know, and then I think that again, it would be useful, I think, for members of the public whose own rights were violated in terms of the registration process to begin to take take action, not necessarily just for themselves, but for the country as a whole, because that might be a process that addresses the issue in a way that that would depoliticize it.
Yes.
You know, if you, Joe Public, who does not belong to any particular party but was registered falsely, for example, it would enable us to then address some of these processes.
Expansion of the political space is equated sometimes with more participation by women, and I think this country has opened big doors for women participation in politics, mainstreaming them, either through creation of, you know, reserved positions like county women rep and so on, but also leaving the space within the mainstream. Did the women's space or the participation in national politics, in our leadership, improve at the last election?
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that because we have these reserved spaces, we have, even though we have not met the constitutional minimum threshold in relation to many of them, we have women in those institutions. But I think the fact that we have those reserved spaces was used as justification
to lock them out of
to avoid
compliance within the
yes,
competitive
to avoid taking measures that would ensure that in the future we don't have to achieve more equitable representation through
nominations,
through those kind of means. We shouldn't have to be forced by a country, because it's very expensive to have to force ourselves to deal with this. So I think, you know, we need to again look at the electoral system. Some of these things are questions of the kind of electoral system that we have, because if you look at countries where you have better representation, where it's not been by quotas, you will find that those countries don't, most of them don't have a first past the post electoral system. Most of them have a proportional representation system, which tends to be a system that allows people who are more vulnerable to be able to enter the process. So you'll find better statistics, not only in respect of women, but even in terms of diversity around people with disabilities, people who belong to minorities, you know, ethno-racial minorities. So I think, again, with the women, there is what the law requires us, which I think in the short term is what we're going to have to rely on. But I think we need to be doing a lot more work and demanding more again from the political parties, and, you know, educating ourselves more as a public in terms of addressing that historical problem.
Okay. What we're talking about here is very important, but how sure are we that is going to be implemented, that there is going to be a follow-up? I asked this question before, that there's going to be a follow-up and these issues raising are going to be addressed and we have a better election in 2017.
Mutegi, honestly, that responsibility lies with us. We
As
as Kenyans, the
Kenyans
people,
generally, but
I have been consistently talking about this, because I think historically we have, as the Kenyan people, talked a lot about our leadership. But if we as a public do not demand a better quality of leadership, we are going to find ourselves in the same cycle. So we need to begin to realize Article 3 of the Constitution requires of all of us that we ensure its protection and its being upheld. And I think a lot of the work needs to also be in the civic space.
So
I know
what's
it's a
the
long
problem with
journey.
the people? Because then the people are not protecting their constitution. What is the problem? Is it apathy? Have people given up? Are they manipulable? Are they vulnerable to political manipulation?
How many Okiom Tatas are in this country?
I don't think, you see, we need to start realizing you don't have to be Okia. How many of us voted?
Yes.
How many of us registered? How many of us who can read took the time to explain to somebody who can't read what these provisions mean? How many of us have taken the time to find out who the member of the county assembly, because every single one of us voted for a member of a county assembly.
Yes.
How many of us actually took the time to find out who we were voting for?
People voted for parties.
Yeah,
they voted for that party, whoever was on that party.
It doesn't have to
Some people actually don't know their county reps, if you ask me. And
some people actually did not even vote for county representatives. You vote for the president and you vote for MP, you forget others, and the governor.
Exactly. So those are the kind of things. Yeah. We're not asking you to go and stand on a street corner, and then if you voted, because some of us did, and that person is behaving in a manner that you don't think is appropriate, how many of us are going up to that MP, to that senator, to that member of a county or governor and saying, I gave you my vote. I gave you my vote because I believed you when you said in your manifesto that you were going to do X, Y, Z, but you're not doing that.
Let's look at the campaign, that phase that was very crucial. In the campaign period, there was a lot of accusations, state participating in the election or candidates using state resources. You have a mention of that in the report. What are your findings around that and recommendations?
I want to distinguish between different levels, because one of the things that actually worked about this election was generally, aside from the aside from the Mombasa incident and an incident that occurred also in Mathare, in Nairobi. Generally, in terms of security, we observed an improvement. Whether or not I don't know what the factors were, and maybe those are some of the things we need to go back and look at that actually worked, and look to see how can that be affirmed in a way that's positive. And so one of the areas we saw was like interventions in certain areas that prevented what could have turned into very volatile situations. However, we still need to, I'm sorry, David. I need to ask you again. What the question was.
Well, in terms of the campaign, maybe first, even before we come back to that, I was asking for what you found around the campaign, the use of state resources by public officers, and the deployment of state resources allegedly to aid certain candidates or political parties. But we'll get back to that shortly as you reflect on that. Let me get what the feedback is from our viewers. Mwakazi, I'm sure you have
absolutely there. Yeah, we've got loads of responses here. Thank you, Madam Chesoni, for coming. In fact, a very positive remark here. Ambi from Siaya says, morning Chesoni, always banal, looking them straight in the eyes and spewing it out as it is. Speak, a lady of substance. All right. Now let's get to the comments in relation to what we're discussing this morning. Dinga from Nairobi says, Madam Chesoni, do you notice the Electoral Commission did not publish election results in 2007 and 2013? What is the implication? These elections remain contested. So that's the first comment there, question rather. There's another one here. Dear Mr. Mutegi, please inform your guest that peace is priceless and we shall forever be indebted to the media for calling for peace. The shame of 2007-2008 should never happen again. That is Jeff from Karen. Two more. S. Mwangi says, I do believe Kenyan voters have never enjoyed their right of voting because the results tend to be negative to their expectations. And then a final one here, this a bit interesting. Bomet Town, this is Walter Tisia from Bomet Town Center, says, Kenya needs a school of election with psychology of silence, psychology of violence, and psychology of ethnicity units. Back to you.
Those are good units. I don't know who's going to set up that school to teach the psychology of violence. But what's your thoughts about that? People, saying Kenya needed peace, regardless. the media did an excellent job. That opinion still persists.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Martin Luther King, who was somebody that I deeply respect and whose work matters a lot to me, once said that peace without justice is anemic.
Peace without justice
There is a difference. Peace without justice is anemic. There is a difference between peace and calm. And in order to achieve peace, you do need to acknowledge when things are not right. There cannot be peace if I am sitting here and I am comfortable, but you, Mutegi, my neighbor, are not at peace. So even when I am enjoying peace, I have a responsibility, if I am committed to peace, to ensuring that it is not something that only I enjoy, but that those around me enjoy. Conflict is a natural part of life. There is nothing wrong with conflict. What there is a problem with is when we pretend that it is not happening, and when we do not find peaceful ways to reflect on and to dialogue on those conflicts and what is causing those conflicts.
So it's not peace at the expense of everything.
What I am disputing is that that is even peace in the first place.
It is calm.
That is calm.
That precedes.
Exactly. You are waiting for
conflict.
Something. Yes. When you pretend that there is nothing going on,
yeah.
In the end, what happens is that those things, it's like sweeping your house, and every single day, instead of putting the rubbish in the dustpan,
you hide it
and
in
then
a corner.
disposing it, yes, you sweep it under the carpet and you hide it in the corner. What then happens
eventually
in the long run?
Eventually a disease will break out in that house, an epidemic, and you'll die from it.
So that is what I'm distinguishing.
Okay. Let's go back to the question I'd asked you, Marshall, about deployment of state resources and abuse of state resources.
Yes.
Or taking of sides by the state, allegedly.
That is the bit that I had wanted, because you asked me a number of questions in succession. So I'm sorry, I got a little bit lost in the process of answering one of them. Yes. So there was a problem around that. We noticed that when we initially, because I think our first report documented the use of several government vehicles, for example, in places where they shouldn't have been, or at party-specific rallies, or when individuals who held high office were going to campaign in different places.